I now draw your attention to what you really see as you walk in. When you walk in this room, yes, this is going on up above, but what you really see are these three badly damaged figures right here. And this is ancient damage, partly under the calcifications, this damage. And yet, the hieroglyphs, although a little fragmentary, because they were painted last, and some of that thick black paint fell off before the calcifications could preserve them. Nevertheless, the hieroglyphs not intentionally damaged, but the figures themselves. Perhaps it tells us who would have damaged them, and perhaps it tells us that it is not their names that matter, but rather their faces, and they may have been perceived to be functionally alive, and that they had to have their faces chipped out piece by piece. These three figures are dancers, and we will see them again in these paintings. They are young lords. They all describe themselves as being young lords, prominent in the dynasty. And it seems very likely that it's one of these young lords who's just been named, perhaps this one in the middle, they're all dancing, who has just been named to be the new successor. Perhaps that is the moment that is unfolding here in front of us. If I speak with some tentativeness, it's because we can't have just one simple story for the Bonampak paintings. There are those who commissioned these paintings, those who executed these paintings. And there are stories that seem to be erupting that are not necessarily the stories that they intended to tell. We'll see that a little more clearly in room 2. But it's why there are more than just the stories that were intentionally commissioned here. Our three dancers stand at the middle, so if you, again, you're imagining yourself walking into room 1. And by the way, now you can see that there's carved lintel over the doorway. There's this built-in bench with this fancy step fret design. You walk in, you see these figures, and by the way, that height of that doorway, it is exactly my height without shoes on. So if I'm wearing one of these glamorous costumes, I better get down and be reverent as I step into this room. And as I step into this room, I block all viewing of it. There is no source of natural light. Torches were never used in this space. How did they see it, you may well ask? And it seems it's quite well illuminated first thing in the morning. This is morning light is what comes through the doors. And as you walk into the room, you walk in through this doorway. And there were curtain ties here. And in fact, the Maya had curtain ties on the outside of this building as well. It must have been wrapped up like a Christo project, because the Maya seemed to have been trying to preserve it, knowing how that in a world where you get 100 inches of rain a year, that to be able to save paintings against the ravages of time would take active engagement on their part. As you walk in through the door, you find yourself accompanied, jumping as part of the procession that either goes to the right or the left. To the left, we have this marvelous musicians and these costumed characters who are about to perform. To the right, we have individuals named as regional governors. Here's a huge composite of infrared that my colleagues and I generated. I just want you to see the kind of crisp detail that informs then the same area in color, and then to turn it into the reconstruction as this procession of musicians unfolds. The Maya are trying to do interesting things in this painting. Look at our maraca players, and you begin to feel that time is almost elapsing in front of you. Did the Maya, who used paper for everything and who loved the idea of time elapsing. After all, I told you they were thought to have been timekeepers. Well, they were timekeepers, but all timekeeping had a purpose. Were they, in fact, even able to imagine something like a flip book? I say that to you without really without irony, because at the time of the Spanish invasion, one of the things the Spanish complain about is how people in the New World waste paper all the time. Our musicians here playing maracas, behind them a drummer standing apart from them, and then turtle shells that are being played with deer antlers. This is what the painting looked like in 1963. It's always good to kind of calibrate and see it as painting. If we look at our drummer, we look at a detail of some of our maraca players. They're also said to be singers. So they are filling this room with sound. And our drummer takes his hands off the skin. You feel sound being lifted into the space. He's standing still. He's sure not moving with that big drum. They're all dancing around him, very much as we see in 16th century manuscripts made after the Spanish invasion, or on Maya pots